2022 CR 11795, State of Texas versus Angel Gonzalez. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Allie Jackson.
Defense?
Kathy Compton and Rolando Arguelles for Mr. Gonzalez.
And are you Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, are both parties ready to proceed, state?
State is ready.
Defense?
Defense is ready, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring the jurors up. Just 1 second. State, do you have your witness?
Yes, we can put her up, Judge.
Yes. Hello. Hi. All right, we're ready.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, state, call your next witness.
The state calls Crystal Ferguson.
Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand. Make sure you keep your voice up so that members of the jury and the court reporter can hear. If you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Detective Crystal Ferguson.
Detective Ferguson, will you please take a minute and introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. Again, my name is Detective Crystal Ferguson. I've been on the department for 19 years. I've been at homicide for 7 years. I've worked suicides, homicides, murders. I've worked on gang unit. I've also worked various positions on patrol, bike patrol, as a detective and an officer.
And what law enforcement agency do you work for?
I work for the San Antonio Police Department.
And how long have you been a homicide detective?
7.5 years.
And during your 7.5 years, how many homicide cases have you worked on? Roughly.
Probably close to, with everything, probably about 80 or more. I don't know, depending on like people we assist, not just our cases, but we also help, assist with another detective when we go out to scenes. So we do multiple, probably in all those years that I've been there.
Can you tell me a little bit about the training and experience you have that qualifies you to be a homicide detective?
Sure. I've been to various investigative schools, taken upon myself also as well to go to various investigative schools. They also send us through the department, obviously to get training on any type of like scene recreations, firearms, instrument tools, like for knives, things like that. That's pretty much, all the training that we get.
And what are your duties as a homicide detective?
We get called out to suicides, suspicious deaths, and homicide murders.
And when you say you get called out, what do you do generally speaking for those cases?
So if we have like a murder, we have the sergeants that get a phone call from someone and, from whoever's going to be like usually a night CID or somebody if it's on at night. If it's during the day, we get a call from a sergeant, whoever's on scene, and asks us to come to the scene to start the investigation.
On October 3rd of 2021, were you working in the homicide unit?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that date, did you get assigned to a murder involving a victim by the name of Isaac Aguilar?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you write a report with regard to your involvement in that case?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it help your testimony here today to have that report with you on your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective, I'm going to hand you what have been marked as States Exhibit 35 and 36. Feel free to refresh your recollection, but please don't read directly from it.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what States Exhibit 35 is?
I apologize, ma'am. I'm trying to look for the property stuff with the actual evidence on it. I apologize.
No, that's all right. We can get you a copy of that. Detective, States Exhibit 35, is that the report you generated for this case?
Yes.
And did you write a supplement to that initial report?
Yes.
And is that what is in States Exhibit number 35?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell me the address of the location of the scene that you investigated on October 3rd?
Yes, I believe it was. Yes.
Is that, sorry. Is that here in Bear County?
Yes, ma'am.
And why were you called out?
I was told by my sergeant that there was a male that had been stabbed at the house and that he had been transported to the hospital and he had passed away.
So when you get assigned to that case, what is the first thing that you do?
We go out to the scene to go assess the scene. We get a search warrant for a house, depending on, we ended up finding out that everything happened outside though. And then we assess the scene, talk with CSI, possibly any witnesses, and then we have witnesses go back to our headquarters and normally conduct interviews.
And did you go out to the scene on this day?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's previously been marked and admitted. State's Exhibit number 1. And State's Exhibit number 4, I believe. Do you recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
And what do they depict, Detective?
The actual crime scene.
Okay, Detective. And is this how it appeared by the time that you arrived at the scene?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember if it was day or night, sun up or sundown when you arrived?
I remember it was like dusk. It was starting to, sun was already starting to go down, but we were in there through the night. I do remember that.
And when you arrived, what's the first thing that you did?
I remember we looked at the scene, but I remember contacting the CSI that were out there to see what they had processed.
And why is it important to contact the CSI when you arrive at the crime scene?
One, because they were already out there and they usually are the ones who collect any type of evidence. And I don't want to make sure that there's something, maybe if, when they're taking photos or they're taking video, a lot of times I don't want to get in the middle of a scene while they're trying to process everything. So I usually like to know what they saw, where things were placed, just to make sure that nothing had been moved. Just to make sure that everything's still in the original condition when I get there.
Show you what has previously been marked as State's Exhibit number 10 and admitted. This is State's Exhibit number 10 is CSI Oliva's sketch. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you direct her in the creation of this sketch?
No.
Was it helpful in your investigation?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it helpful in your investigation?
Well, because it also tells you where every piece of evidence had been marked, where something had been laid, or if there was, whatever they collected is usually numbered. And so it'll usually, it'll help us out, to know where things had happened, especially when we go back later to write our reports as well.
All right, Detective, I'm handing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 37. What is State's Exhibit 37?
The property report.
I want to focus particularly on the items that were connected by CSI Oliva. Do you have items? Are you aware of items collected by CSI Oliva?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So with regard to the sketch that we have on the screen there, do you recall what item number 1 was? E1. As collected by CSI Oliva.
I believe it was the knife.
I'm showing you it's been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 1. So State's Exhibit number 1 was indeed collected at the bottom of the slide, as depicted in the sketch and in State's Exhibit 14, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 13. What does that depict, Detective?
Picture of the slide that had some apparent blood.
And at the time that you arrived, did it look exactly like that or did it look different?
probably gonna be about the same. I mean, usually they leave everything out, like I said, when I get there, so. It would be.
So after you get the layout of the scene, and take note of the items of evidence that might be important and certainly what's been, collected from the CSIs, what do you do next?
From there, like I said, we try to gather any witnesses that we see and we get them sent back. So whoever was helping me at the time for Wing would be interviewing some witnesses at headquarters.
And did you identify witnesses present for this case?
Yeah, we did. They were not at the scene when I arrived, though.
Okay,
No, they had already been sent back by another detective.
and they're not being interviewed by you, correct?
No,
They're obviously
No,
not.
I did not interview those witnesses, no.
What did you do next?
I believe we had gone into to the home. We had a search warrant, and we had gone into the home.
And was anything of importance, noted or collected from the home?
I believe so. I have to look. Can I refer to my report?
Yes.
I don't believe so, ma'am. I don't remember us taking anything from there.
Roughly how long were you at the scene of the crime?
Got dark there for a while. It was a few hours. I
A
can
few
tell you,
hours.
yeah.
And during the course of your initial investigation, were you able to identify a suspect?
Yes,
Who was that suspect?
Angel Gonzalez.
What did you do next after leaving the scene of the crime?
I believe we had gone back to headquarters. I mean, we'd gone back to headquarters and, actually, we had done some initial canvassing, actually, I believe, for surveillance, and then usually we'll go back.
What is canvassing?
Canvassing is normally when we go to homes and we'll look for video. A lot of times people have Ring video cameras. Somebody could have been outside because of the time of day. We usually try to contact people.
And did you find any videos or any additional witnesses for this case?
No, unfortunately, no.
At some point, was a warrant for the arrest of Angel Gonzalez generated and signed?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall how long from October 3rd to, or do you recall what date the defendant was apprehended?
Again, if I can refer to my report, but I believe it was October 10th, somewhere around there. I'd have to look.
Please refer to your reports.
Thank you. Okay, it would have October 9th. It's like
October 9th.
October 9th, 2021.
And did you have the opportunity to briefly meet with Angel Gonzalez?
Yes, in the interview room.
Do you see that individual here in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please identify him by an item of clothing that he's wearing?
Gray button-up shirt.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant. So after the defendant is apprehended, what were the next steps in your investigation after October 9th?
After interviewing him,
Correct.
after interviewing him, I usually, any of the preliminary, anything that we have to do for follow-up, like cell phones. Normally we'll connect any type of, we'll take a buccal swab, like a DNA swab from someone.
Can you take a minute to describe what a buccal swab or a DNA swab is?
Sure, it is a buccal swab. Normally sounds like it's funny, but it's a long cotton swab basically. And we rub the inside of the cheek, the left and the right cheek. We get DNA for comparison for anything that we found at the scene, and then we send it into the lab.
And do you know if a buccal swab was done in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that pursuant to a warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was the buccal swab taken from?
From Angel Gonzalez.
And who took the buccal swab from Angel? Who got the defendant's DNA?
I did.
What did you do with the buccal swab after you collected it?
We placed it in the property room.
And do you have that item here with you today?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that the item that you brought here today is the item that you collected from the defendant?
We know because we generate a barcode with our case number, and each piece of evidence is marked with a unique barcode number, property room number.
What is the case number for this case?
This one's gonna be SAPD 21196680.
Is that the number that's on top of your prosecution guide?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the number that is on the buccal swab you brought with
Yes, ma'am.
you? And you said it was placed in the property room, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a secure facility?
Yes, ma'am.
Does just anybody have access to the property room, or is it specific people?
No, it's a secured facility. No, not everybody is allowed in there. We have to have special access to it.
And do you have access to it?
Yes, ma'am.
Marking the buccal swab as state's exhibit number 30.
I'm sorry, 38.
Eight. Detective, would you please open state's exhibit number 38 and take a brief look at the contents of it?
Okay.
Is the buccal swab in the same or substantially similar condition as the day that you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, state would offer state's exhibit 38 into evidence.
No objection, sir.
All right, state's exhibit number 38 is admitted without objection.
So I want to talk a little bit more about buccal swabs generally speaking. What is a known standard, if you know, in terms of buccal swabs and things of that nature?
You're talking about like as far as, I'm sorry, can you reread the question again? Just so you-
Yeah. What is the purpose of collecting the buccal swab?
Oh, to collect it from whoever we're collecting the DNA swab from is so that we can compare it to any of the evidence that we found on scene.
And would you also, or would someone also collect a known sample of some kind from a victim in this type of case?
Yes,
Do you know if that was done in this case?
yes.
And how do you know that that was done?
Well, because of usually with the medical examiner's office. Well,
Did you attend the autopsy for this case?
on this one, let me refer, if you don't mind, because at that time, COVID was going on and they were very much, yes, you can, no, you can, kind of, at that time, it was a little. No, I don't believe I did, ma'am.
Would that have been due to the COVID restrictions that were
Yeah.
going on?
Yes, because this was 21. Yeah, that would have been during that time.
Would it be typical for you now or prior to COVID to have attended an autopsy?
Oh, yes.
Why is it important for you to attend an autopsy if you have the ability to do so?
The doctors will normally explain, for instance, with gunshot wounds, entry, exits. If somebody was shot, let's say in the back versus the front, and or somebody was stabbed, where they were stabbed, they'll explain to us if it's in a downward trajectory up, upwards. And it's also helpful because they will normally, a lot of times you can also, depending on what is being told to you at the time. You know, if somebody gives you an explanation of what happened, let's say at a scene, compared to what is being told to us by the doctor, we can see if somebody's being truthful with us or not.
Although you did not attend the autopsy yourself, did you ultimately receive an autopsy report from the medical examiner's office during the course of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall receiving a cause and manner of death report from the medical examiner's office as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And if there was a buccal swab taken and collected for this case, would it be routine for the medical examiner to then collect a known sample from the victim they're examining?
Oh, yes.
Do you know if that was done in this case?
Yes, because whenever I sent a request from the lab to have DNA comparisons, we have to request from the medical examiner through they have a ME number, which is their case number that identifies whoever they're taking their samples from.
And were the buccal swab and the known standard from the victim in the case submitted to the laboratory along with the swabbings taken from the crime scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you receive an analysis back from the crime lab with regard to the items submitted?
Yes, we did.
At this time, the state would pass the witness, Your Honor.
All right, defense.
Good afternoon, Detective Ferguson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Detective Ferguson, you've previously identified my client, Angel Gonzalez, correct?
Yes.
May I approach her?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 1. You recognize the person in this picture?
Yes.
Who is that?
Andrew Gonzalez.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as offense exhibit number 2. You recognize the person in this picture? Who is that?
Andrew Gonzalez.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 3. Who is that?
Andrew Gonzalez.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 4. Who is that a picture of?
Andrew Gonzalez.
And now I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 5. Who is that a picture of?
His face is covered up partially, but I'm assuming Andrew Gonzalez.
Well, I don't want you to see.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't, I mean, his face is partially covered, sir, so I can't. Looks like his eyes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Detective.
No problem. You're fine.
I'm going to tender over to State, see if they have any objection.
When we approach Your Honor?
Yes.
Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 1. And you just stated that this is a picture of Angel Gonzalez, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this picture was taken when he was arrested.
Yes, when he was apprehended. Yes, sir.
Defense exhibit number 2.
Mhm.
You just testified that this is Angel Gonzalez again, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is a picture that was taken of injuries that he had when he was arrested.
Yes, sir.
What about defense exhibit number 3? Do you recognize him?
Yeah, Andrew Gonzalez.
And do you know when this picture?
No.
All right, and I'm sorry, the last question that was related to which, okay, which exhibit was it related to?
3.
Okay, thank you. All right, so no objections to,
1 and 2.
Permission to publish them?
all right, just one moment. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have you all step outside for 10 minutes and I will bring you back. Remember my previous instructions, all right? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.
Just that.
Yes. bring defense exhibits 1 and 2?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, any objection?
No.
All right, then defense 1 and 2 is admitted without objection. You may
Permission
just
to publish?
grant it.
Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 1. And what is this a picture of?
Of Angel Gonzalez, the day he was apprehended.
And what can we observe right here on his right eyebrow?
A cut of some sort, like a mark, red. I can see like blood or something on it. I'm sorry, there's like a glare.
Glare.
Yes.
All right, if you need to step down, you can step down into the well.
Didn't go there, so.
Just to make it easier. So what is this a picture of right here?
Right here, an abrasion.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to keep
Yeah,
your voice
yeah.
up.
Sorry, an abrasion.
And what about right here on top of his right lip?
Again, it looks like another abrasion.
Right there we go.
Mhm.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 2. And what is this a picture of?
Of his nose, and there's a cut to his nose.
And would this cut be consistent with the knife cut?
I mean, normally you'd have something more on the face. I mean, a whole.
Judge,
I'm sorry, if
I
you could
can't
keep
hear.
your voice up,
You can
please.
stop that.
Can I go back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
If
Can you
you-
state your question again? I'm sorry.
Yes. In defense exhibit number 2, we just set up that is the laceration to his nose, correct?
A cut, yeah, it looks like a cut to his nose. Yes, sir.
And would that be consistent with the knife cut?
Objection, Your Honor.
Um,
Witness would have no knowledge of what is consistent or not.
All right,
She
you
can
can lay the,
answer- She has knowledge
Defense.
or not?
you can lay the foundation for her to answer that question if she can.
um,
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Ask your question.
Officer,
mhm.
in your training and experience as a detective, detective,
You're fine.
would this be consistent with the knife cut?
It's kind of hard to say, actually, so that day I actually had asked him, but he asked for his lawyer, so I couldn't ask him
Judge,
to.
can
When
we
we approach-
approach?
I'm sorry. Did I say something?
Yes, just 1 moment.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the last answer from the detective from this witness you are to disregard in its entirety. Does everyone understand? All right. Does every,
Judge, if I could just approach very briefly.
yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you during voir dire, that everyone has a right to have an attorney. Does everyone understand that? And everyone has a constitutional right to remain silent. Does everyone understand that? And everybody, if the police were to seek to question them, they have every right to have an attorney present with them. That's the laws of the United States. Does everyone understand? So, for example, if someone were to come to any citizen and want to ask them questions about anything, if it were an officer or if it were a prosecutor, they have every right to have an attorney present. Does everyone understand? And there are many reasons that people do that because, for example, sometimes in the legal field, if you have not been in law school, if you've never had contact maybe with someone from law enforcement or a prosecutor, you have no idea about what's going on and you may want to have an attorney, but that is not to be considered whatsoever. Does everyone understand? So you are to wholly disregard the last statement by the witness. Does everyone understand?
Yeah.
You are not to consider at all. It is not a part of the evidence in this case. Does everyone understand? Is there anyone here who cannot do that? All right, I'll take that as a fact that everyone can follow my instructions. Defense, is there anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, any further questions of the witness?
Oh, no, I need to proceed with the witness.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Ferguson, you mentioned that you've been on the force for 19 years,
Yes, sir.
7.5 roughly in homicide.
Yes, sir.
And as part of being in homicide, you testified that you investigate suicides,
Mhm.
homicides, as well as murders.
Yes, sir.
Throughout your experience and all the homicides that you've done, have
Mhm.
any of them been ruled to be an accident?
Any of the murders,
Homicides that you've
Homicides.
investigated.
accidents, accidental deaths on their own, yes, but if that's what you're asking. Can you rephrase the question? I'm not sure. what you're-
Absolutely. So when you investigate a homicide, which
Mhm.
involves more than one person, correct?
Yes.
Have they ever been ruled to be an accident?
No, none of mine have, no.
Have any of them come to you that they were actually self-defense?
Yes, we have had some.
And in the self-defense cases that you've investigated, what were the contributing factors?
That, I don't know if I should say, someone that was, introduced a weapon into, let's say, a deadly weapon into a, like somebody was having an argument and whoever introduced the deadly weapon, person tried to defend themselves. Normally, I mean, those are the ones that I've had, yes.
And what are some of the factors that you consider? For example, do you consider the height of the person?
I consider the deadly weapon to begin with. If someone's having a fight and then someone introduces the deadly weapon, the other person does have a right to defend themselves.
And just to clarify, a deadly weapon can be anything.
Yes, it can be a knife, it could be a gun, it could be, anything that you can use to kill somebody, yes.
It could be a pen.
Somebody can kill somebody with it, yes.
Are there any other factors that you consider besides the deadly weapon?
It just depends. Maybe, what are you talking about? Like male, female? Like if it's height, weight?
Absolutely. Anything that you would consider.
Yes. I mean, there's every case is different, sir. So I can't give you a generalization for every single case that I've done.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the best
Do
I
you
can
consider family history?
do. If I have that, yes. If I have that knowledge, yes, at the time.
Do you consider difference in age?
We can, if it's an elderly person versus a younger person, yes.
Difference in size or weight?
Yes, you can.
Difference in height?
You can.
What about any history of abuse?
If I have that knowledge, yes.
Okay. So let's move forward to this day. On October 3rd, at what time did you arrive on scene?
Can I look at my report? Are you
Absolutely.
starting with it? Okay. Okay, this is saying my notification was at 22:15 hours.
And in layman's terms, what time is that?
That's saying about 10:15.
And how long were you there for?
A few hours.
A few is just because that could be different for everybody. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours.
It could have been 2 to 3 hours, sir.
And while you were there, what were you doing primarily?
Looking at the scene, looking at the evidence that they had, CSI. We had gone into the home also to see if maybe the weapon or anything, maybe it was, anything else like was there, or the family, anybody else that may have had knowledge of what happened. But they had told me they had transported people already at that point. We usually stay and canvass the area as well.
And just to clarify, you were the lead detective on this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And to be a little bit more descriptive, when you say looking at the scene and walking the scene,
Mhm.
were there markers already on the scene? Like the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5?
Yes, there's markers there.
So you walked every single one of them.
Normally I go with a CSI person and we go like each one and they'll explain to me what something is or was, especially if there's something that they need to collect because of weather or different reasons. And they have to, they'll tell me, hey, this was here, but we had to collect whatever. I usually go, yes, usually with the CSI, whoever the main one is there, and go through all the pieces of evidence normally, yes.
And you observed the different blood marks that were left throughout the whole scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of blood. Yeah.
I need you to slow down, please, just for the record's sake.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And to your knowledge,
Mhm.
Isaac was on the slide, correct?
Yes, that's what I was told. Yes, sir.
That's where he was picked up by EMS and transported to the hospital.
From what they said he had laid back on the slide.
And after that, you went and conducted interviews?
No, they another detective had interviewed the witnesses at the, at headquarters.
But you actually conducted an interview on Angel Gonzalez.
Well, yes, sir. But not that same day.
And as part of the interview, self-defense was raised.
Can I say? I don't, I know that's kind of.
Yes.
Like you just told me that's. Yeah.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, and you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, as part of your investigation, several witnesses were interviewed.
Yes, sir.
And out of all the witnesses that were interviewed, none of them said where the knife came from, correct?
I did not interview those people, sir. It was the other.
If-
Can I refer to my report?
Absolutely. And where were their interviews conducted of the individuals?
At headquarters.
The date?
Oh, the date, the same date of the, or it's gonna be I'm sorry, October 3rd.
So that would have been like the eve or the night of
Yes.
October 3rd.
Mhm.
And in this case, you submitted a complaint, correct?
Yes,
And the affidavit was submitted on October 4th, 4:12 a.m.
I'm sorry, rephrase the question again? What are you?
The affidavit for the arrest warrant
Mhm,
was signed and submitted by you
mhm.
on October. I'm sorry, we can't use or we have to say either yes,
Yes,
or no.
sir.
Sorry. Thank you. On October 4th at 4:12 a.m.
Do you have my warrant with me that I could?
May I approach on?
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe this will help your question reflection. And I'll rephrase. October 4th at 4:12 p.m.
Yes, sir.
And that's your signature right there?
On the top, yes.
And that's your badge number?
Yes,
And on this case, you testified that there was, probably mispronounced this, buccal swabs collected, correct?
yes, sir.
And you submitted this complaint or affidavit before you got the results of that.
Yes, sir.
And even though you had no knowledge, none of the witnesses said that they saw Angel Gonzalez had a knife. You filed this complaint stating that the defendant intentionally caused the death of Isaac.
I did not say that they didn't say he had a knife. You asked me if they said where the knife came from. No, I don't believe that anybody said where it came from, but they did say that it's in my report that Aguilar said that he was stabbed, that his brother had stabbed him.
Correct, but none of the witnesses, or anyone for that matter, knows where the knife came from, correct?
Where the knife came from.
Or saw him get stabbed? Is that in your report?
I would have to look, but during the interviews, yeah, they were saying that he was stabbed by his brother. That was the whole thing. They identified him. Everybody signed. Something, they know him. They were all family at the party.
Can you tell me who said that? Who said, which of the witnesses said that they saw Angel stab Isaac?
Can I look at my report?
Absolutely.
Okay. I believe they said that he said that he was stabbed by him. And they were the two that were fighting.
So in other words, nobody said that.
Can I read from here what it says? It says Christine stated that,
No,
Can I?
ma'am. You can
Okay,
only
well then-
reflect the recollection
okay.
from your report.
okay, well, on it said that there was, what? One of the witnesses states that,
Detective,
mhm,
which witness?
Christine Rodriguez.
So Christine Rodriguez said that Isaac had the knife? Or that Angel had the knife, I'm sorry?
No, she said that Aguilar had stated,
I'm
she,
gonna object to hearsay, Your Honor.
All
I
right,
will ask you, I will be,
Just 1 second. So if you repeat your last question, and then you're allowed to answer the question.
I'll be more clear with my question. Which of the witnesses said that Angel stabbed Isaac? That they saw him?
none of them said they saw him.
No further questions, pass the witness.
State.
Yes, Judge. Detective, did you or another detective interview Juliet Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you or another detective interview Christine Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you or another detective interview an eyewitness individual by the name of Moses Perez?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you or another detective interview an eyewitness by the name of Angelica Diaz?
Yes, ma'am.
And did those interviews play a part in your decision to issue an arrest warrant for the individual sitting at this table?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if there was any mention of self-defense by any of those individuals?
No, ma'am.
Detective, I'm going to show you what have been marked States Exhibits 39, 40, and 41. Do you recognize these photos?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you recognize them to be photos of?
Of Angel Gonzalez, his face,
An objection, may we approach?
Yes.
arm, no.
Yes, you can approach.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Detective. What are they photographs of?
Of Angel Gonzalez.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of Angel Gonzalez on the day that you met with him, October 9th, 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer States Exhibits 39, 40, and 41 into evidence.
Yes.
And Detective, did you meet with the defendant on the day that he was arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, state moves to admit States Exhibits 39, 40, and 41.
No objections, Judge.
All right. States Exhibit 39, 40, and 41 are admitted without objection.
May I publish?
Yes.
Detective, what are we looking at here in States Exhibit 39?
I'm sorry, can you say one more time? Couldn't hear you.
What are we looking at in 39? States Exhibit number 2.
It was a photo of Angel Gonzalez.
Right, and I believe in this photograph
Your
here.
Honor, may we take this witness on board outside the presence of the jury?
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, remember the court's previous instructions. I will have you all back here in 10 minutes. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated.
May I respond for?
Yes.
Your Honor, the time for voir dire was prior to the evidence being admitted into evidence. It's improper at this time. The items are already admitted into evidence and the jury has the ability to see them.
Yes.
If I may, and Judge, you tell me if I need to sit down and let Rolando speak, because some
Yeah.
judges, they want us to keep consistent. But here's the problem. Yes, those exhibits are admitted, but our objection are to the questions, because the questions as to we want to know if before they do this in front of the jury, if this detective has any knowledge of the source of these injuries and how she knows that. Because if they're going to try to elicit that kind of testimony from her, we have a right to have her establish her basis of knowledge for that before those questions are propounded in front of the jury.
All right, so that is something that needs to be handled through an objection. If there's a question that is asked and you all have an objection to it, then you can make your objection.
Then we'll object to the line of questioning that she seemed to be going into. And if we need to object as we go, that's fine.
Yes, because here's the thing, everybody. I have no idea where the questioning is going. So what will end up happening is the jury is going to be brought back in. They're going to be back in here in 5 more minutes. And you all can make your objections as the questions are asked. And I will make my ruling. Okay. All right. And Deputy, let me let them know whenever they're ready to come back in.
You want me to go get it?
Yes, if they're ready, we can take it up. All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, State, it's still your witness. You may proceed with your questions.
Of course, Judge. Detective, in States Exhibit number 39, I see here that there seems to be some kind of injury to his left nostril, or excuse me, his right nostril. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What about to his right eyebrow? Do you see an injury there as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 40. What does that appear to be?
An abrasion and injury.
To the elbow area?
I'm very sorry. It's really hard to see with the glare.
All right, if you can step down, if you want to step down into the well.
And Detective, if you just want to stand here, you might have, Diana might be able to hear you a little bit better. Yes, to the elbow. Okay, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 41. What does that appear to be?
An abrasion to the hand.
And we talk about the hand and the elbow. Are those the hand and the elbow of the defendant, Angel Gonzalez?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You can sit back down.
Oh, no problem.
And did you observe those injuries on October 9th, the day that you met with him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where did you meet with Angel Gonzalez at?
At police headquarters.
In a specific room?
Yes, in our homicide, the interview rooms that we have.
What is special about those homicide rooms?
It's a room where we can be able to speak with them, but it's quiet. You know, we don't have to worry about outside anybody coming in or anything like that when we're speaking to them.
Are there recording devices in those rooms?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there a video recording device in the room that you met with Angel Gonzalez in?
Yes, ma'am.
I know your interview or your interaction with the defendant was brief. What can you tell
Your
me?
Honor, can we approach again, please?
All right, State.
What can you tell me about the defendant's demeanor when you were not in the interview room and watching from the camera?
He seemed very relaxed.
When you say relaxed, can you describe a little bit of what you mean?
He did not, I mean, he wasn't, everybody acts differently. I mean, when they come in, but, he just seemed very, relaxed, was laying down on the floor. Just things of that nature.
Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 42. What is State's Exhibit number 42?
The photo of, Angel Gonzalez laying on the floor.
And that is during the time that he was in the San Antonio interview room?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of him in the room at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, State moves to admit State's Exhibit number 42.
Yes. All right, State's Exhibit number 42 will be admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Detective, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit number 42?
A photo of Angel Gonzalez at police headquarters laying on the ground.
Detective, I'm going to show you the contents, of State's Exhibit 30 that has been previously admitted into evidence. Do you know what State's Exhibit number 30 is?
Yeah, that's gonna be a knife, the sheath.
Was it the knife that was collected from the scene of the crime?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how to close this knife? Would it surprise you if somebody in this courtroom did know how to close this knife?
No, it would not.
Ask the witness.
Right.
Can we approach briefly,
Yes.
Judge?
All right. State, are you passing the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, defense.
Nothing further with witness.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject to
Recall.
recall, please.
All right, just make sure you're available if someone decides to call you back. All right, State, call your next witness.
The state calls Garen Foster.
And Diana, do you need to sub out any exhibits? Diana, are you ready? Oh, please have a seat. All right, everyone, it's just that when evidence is submitted, there's a special form that the court reporter needs in order to take custody of that evidence. So we're waiting to get the form. All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
My name is Garon Foster, Garon Foster, Foster.
All right, state.
Yes, Judge. Mr. Foster, where do you work?
I'm employed at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory in San Antonio.
And what do you do there?
I'm the forensic scientist supervisor of our forensic serology, forensic DNA section.
And what training or experience did you need to have in order to achieve that position?
From an educational standpoint, I received a bachelor's degree in zoology from the University of Texas at Austin, and then a master's of science in forensic science from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. That position, as well as the others involved with that, I required additional coursework in genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry, statistics, and population genetics.
And the Bexar County Crime Lab, is that an accredited laboratory?
Yes, it is.
And is the accrediting agency recognized by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
Yes, it is.
What does it mean to be accredited?
Accreditation means that your laboratory or whatever entity has met whatever the industry standard is. So for example, in the forensic sciences, it's the procedures, it's the quality assurance, it's the training of the personnel, it's the safety, it's the security of the building, everything that you could think of from an auditing standpoint to be accredited.
And is the accrediting organization recognized and accepted internationally?
Yes, it is.
And with regard to DNA and forensic analysis, have you been proficiency tested in this scope or discipline?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, proficiency testing means that an individual has received items of evidence that we call blind. You don't know what the answer is going to be. And then whatever procedures that you're conducting in the laboratory, you conduct on the proficiency analysis. And we do this 2 times per calendar year, and we submit these items of evidence as well as the results to the proficiency testing provider, again, without knowing what the correct results would be. And then the correct results are submitted to our quality assurance manager to ensure that we have the correct answers.
And when was the last time that you were proficiency tested?
We do it twice a year. I believe the last time was 4 months ago, which means within the next month or 2, I will be receiving my next set of proficiency tests.
Are you licensed as a forensic analyst by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
Yes, I'm a forensic DNA analyst.
And have you received any additional training in the area of DNA analysis?
Yes, I've received plenty of training in the 30 years that I've been doing this in various workshops at a regional, state, national level, including specifically forensic DNA analysis from the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Quantico, Virginia.
And have you testified in Bexar County before as an expert witness in the area of DNA or serology analysis?
Yes, in both forensic serology as well as forensic DNA analysis.
How many times? Many or few?
I would say many.
Let's first talk about serology. What is serology?
Serology, from a forensic standpoint, is the examination of items that are biological in nature. Typically, you would think of blood or seminal fluid, saliva, and trying to identify those biological fluids that are cellular rich so that the potential for a forensic DNA profile could be developed.
And in March of 2022, did you routinely perform serological analysis for the Bexar County Crime Lab if submitted by a law enforcement agency?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall doing a forensic serology report under CIL case number 210-05960?
Yes, I recall releasing a report with that criminal investigation laboratory number on March 10th, 2022.
And do you have a copy of that report there with you?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Excellent. Do you recall what the SAPD case number was in relation to that CIL number?
Yes, the unique San Antonio Police Department case number was 21196-680.
Now, with regard to the evidence that was analyzed by yourself, I want to focus specifically on just a few items. Let's discuss what is in reference in your report as item 1-2. Did you conduct a forensic serological examination of item 1-2?
Yes, I was asked to examine this item for the possible presence of blood. Item 1-2 was swabs that were labeled E1A, swab of knife.
What can you tell me about item in your report 1-3?
1-3 was a shirt. It was a black Nike shirt in which I also examined for the possible presence of blood.
And item 1-4, what can you tell me about that?
Those were swabs, and on the outside of the swab envelope said E3 backyard.
And item 1-5,
Those were also swabs that were labeled E4 fan, FAN.
1-6,
Those were also swabs that said they were collected from item E5 driveway.
item 1-7,
Again, a pair of swabs that was labeled E6 sidewalk.
we're going to skip one and we're going to go to item 1-9. What is that?
Item 1-9 was a switchblade knife that was indicated as E1 by the law enforcement agency.
All right, Mr. Foster, I'm going to show you states exhibits 24, 25, 26, 27, and 29. Are those some of the items that you examined in relation to this case?
Yes, ma'am. These are some of the items in which I examined in this investigation.
And are those some of the items that we just went over?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So, what can you tell me specifically about the items we just discussed?
I was asked to examine these for the possible presence of blood. So the laboratory would perform a chemical color test. It's very simply two chemicals that are added together that are colorless, similar to water, but in the presence of blood, a color change would occur. And then when that color change occurs, it's a presumptive, it's possibly blood. So I was asked on all of those items in which we discussed to conduct that analysis.
And did you conduct that analysis on those items we've discussed?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And with specifically those items which we have discussed, did you reach a conclusion about whether there was the possible presence of blood on those items?
Yes, they were all positive for the possible presence of blood.
Now, in the area, or I guess in your role as a forensic analyst, if there is a possible presence of blood on an item, what happens to it next, that item?
Well, the reason we're testing it is for DNA analysis. If the possible presence of blood is positive, and blood is a cellular rich substance, we would typically then perform DNA analysis. We may do it right at that time, or we would preserve the item for future testing. And in this case, that's what happened. So each one of those swabs that I've mentioned, or the shirt, the swabs were taken or cutting was taken, and it's placed into a sterile container and then placed into a secure freezer. And then it awaits the DNA analysis until I can perform that, which is typically done within a few months.
Did you perform the DNA analysis on those items?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Before we get to the DNA analysis on those items, what is a known standard?
A known standard would we call a reference standard. So a crime scene sample may not know who the DNA belongs to, but a reference standard would be a swab typically taken from the inside of an individual's mouth. And we would know that this came from, for example, this person. In the case of the deceased, the medical examiner would take blood from that individual, and that would serve as the reference standard for the deceased.
Did you receive a buccal swab standard for an Angel Gonzalez in this case?
Yes, I did.
And did you receive a blood stain card for an Isaac Aguilar in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And for the sake of clarity, do you know the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office number associated with the blood stain card in this case?
Yes, the bloodstain card was identified as coming from the Bexar County Medical Examiner's case number 2021-2955.
Let's shift gears and go back to the items we previously discussed. Okay. With regard to item 1-2, was that tested for DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
And now I'm going to go to item 1-3, and you have it now divided 1-3.1 and 1-3.2. And what are those described as?
Well, 1-3 was, I believe, a t-shirt. So I took two different cuttings from that t-shirt. So cutting number 1, we would need to give it a unique designation, and that was the 0.1. And then the second cutting from a different location on that t-shirt is designated as 0.2. So our two items from item 3-1 shirt is now 3-1.1, cutting number 1, 3-1.2, cutting number 2.
And why, in the circumstance of the shirt, why wouldn't you just test the entire shirt?
Well, typically when you have an item, DNA analysis utilizes a very small portion of, and I mean, meaning it's, let's say the size of a BB as an example, or something extremely small. So if you have an entire shirt, it's not that the shirt is taken and placed into some kind of DNA machine or something. I would have to identify some item or location on that shirt. So for example, in this case, I would find what appears to be blood staining, the reddish brown staining. I would perform the presumptive analysis on that. And I had done so on a swab on an area of the front side of the shirt, and then the same thing on an area on the back side of the shirt. So when we say if you tested the shirt, those were the two stains that were tested. But theoretically, if you were to take every thread off of a shirt, you could test thousands of stains per se that was on a shirt.
And were items 1-4 through 1-7 also tested for DNA analysis here?
Yes, ma'am.
And item 19.1 and 19.2.
That is correct.
So were those items that we just discussed then compared or analyzed in regard to the bloodstain card received from the medical examiner's office for Isaac Aguilar and the buckled standard for an Angel Gonzalez?
Yes, they were.
What can you tell me about the conclusions with regard to those items?
Okay, if I start batching some of those items on where I was able to identify a genetic profile, we were able to find that Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a donor of the human DNA on 1-2.1, which were the swab tips, E1A, swab of knife. It's not excluded also on the cutting number 1 from the t-shirt. That was item 1-3.1. Isaac Aguilar is also not excluded as a donor of cutting number 2 from the T-shirt designated as 1-3.2. Isaac Aguilar is also not excluded as a donor of the DNA identified on the swab tips from the backyard, as well as the swab tips from the fan. And in reference to swabbing taken from E1, the knife, the switchblade knife handle area, is not excluded as a donor of the DNA.
With regard to the items we discussed, did you find Angel Gonzalez to be not excluded from any of those items?
Yes, Angel Gonzalez then was not excluded as a donor of the human DNA identified on the swab tips E5 from driveway, swab tips E6 from sidewalk, as well as the major genetic profile identified on the swabbing from E1, which was the switchblade knife.
So both individuals had DNA on the switchblade knife, or they're not excluded.
Yes, it was consistent with a mixture of 2 individuals on the knife blade. One of those individuals, that component we could fully resolve. And then on the other, we were able to look at all potential genetic material and genotypes available. And yes, the other individual was not excluded as well as a donor from that material.
Your Honor, at this time, today we pass the witness.
Defense.
I love DNA and I'm so excited to ever have you as a witness. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
So, and do you go by Mr. Forrester?
Mr. Foster is fine.
Foster, sorry. Judge, can I approach the witness?
Yes.
So while I'm marking a couple of exhibits, I'd like to just make clear that for continuity's sake, whenever you use your own numbering system, you still in your reports, you reference whatever the evidentiary numbers that came with those items to you as well, correct?
That's correct. If there's not an item number, then at least the description of the item will also be there.
Okay. And why do you put your own separate numbers?
Well, each item of evidence must receive a unique item number by the crime laboratory, so we can track that item through a chain of custody. It's not uncommon that we would receive an item from a law enforcement agency and they'll call this E1 as an example. And then a few other items maybe involved in the case will also come in, sometimes called E1. So from a unique standpoint, the laboratory will always assign a unique identifier, and then we will maintain that unique identifier from start to finish.
Great. And in your report, so you talked about the first report that you did, you generated, I believe it was March 10th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that was just a report because the first step that you ever do with any kind of DNA analysis is you are told from somebody what kind of test they want you to run, right?
For the most part, that's correct. We're screening the items of evidence for potential biological material. And when we believe it's positive for something, we typically retain it for DNA analysis.
And are there differences between, say, DNA, like if I put my thumb and bleed on something versus if I happen to rub my hands or scratch my head or things like that?
Well, the DNA itself is exactly the same. However, the sources could be blood, sources could be saliva, When you said scratch your head, we're referring to cellular dandruff and so forth.
Well,
And
not me, but somebody.
Oh, me. Then yes, as long as there are cells present there and with a nucleus, then yes, the DNA would be the same there as well.
Okay, so DNA, however it comes, it doesn't change according to what it may be, whether it's blood, skin, semen, any kind of stuff that comes off or out of our bodies. Generally, you can get some kind of DNA from it under the right circumstances.
Right, and that is correct. And what we don't know, again, specifically would be the origin of that in reference to the biological soiling, blood or dandruff or any of the others.
Right. And so, and I'm guessing, but would it be a correct statement to say that the reason that you guys in the crime lab have your own numbers is because you don't work necessarily just for the police or the prosecutors. You're just there as scientists to do analysis and to conduct these tests and give the results, right?
Well, everything that you said is correct. That's not necessarily why we have unique identifiers. We have a unique identifier so that every item we examine, we can start to finish a chain of custody. But that is correct. We just receive items of evidence at the crime laboratory, not just from the law enforcement agency that was in this case, but multiple law enforcement agencies that theoretically could have the same item number that they have. But so we would give it our unique identifier.
And I know because I work in multiple counties, and I know that sometimes even other counties send their things to you for testing. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And that's how I know your name and know your work. So I would like you to assist me in kind of breaking this down, because as long as I've been doing this, it's still hard for me. And I'm going to show you what is that I've marked as defendants number 6. And this is defendants number 7 and defendants number 8. Now, with regard to the defendants number 7 and number 8, do these diagrams look to you to be consistent with the evidence item numbers that were submitted to you for testing in this case? So I'm going to start with you had mentioned that not your numbers, but I'm going by the report numbers, that E1 was designated as the knife, correct?
That is correct.
And then the E1A was designated as a swab of presumed or apparent blood on the knife. And
That is correct.
They didn't say where.
E1A basically stated swabbing taken from knife.
Okay. And then we've got E2, and just to make it, I know you've got your numbers, but I'm just going to use the numbers that are on the diagram here. The E2, that was the black T-shirt that was found on a slide, right? Or black T-shirt?
Exactly. We don't know exactly where something is collected unless it states it on the packaging material. But yes, in this case, it just stated E2. And then when I opened it up, it was a black T-shirt.
Okay. And you said that you took 2 cuttings from that item, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you talked about E3. That was a blood swab that was collected from the scene, right?
That is correct. And it was labeled on the packaging as backyard.
Okay. And then you had an E4 that was a swab taken. I believe that may have been labeled in your report also as blood swab taken from a fan.
That is correct.
Okay. And then we've got E5, which was a blood swab that was taken. I don't know what your report says, but it was taken also from near the yard. Is that right?
Yes, the outside of the packaging said E5 driveway.
The driveway there. Okay. And then I'm going to show you referencing here in defense exhibit number 8, There was also what was in your report came to you as an E6, another swab from the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That is correct. E6 was labeled sidewalk.
Okay. And Judge, I'm going to tender these to the state and ask that they be, I'm going to offer them and ask they be.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Clear. And did you ever get a copy of any of the diagrams or anything? Did that ever come to you as part of your testing or analysis of items?
No, ma'am. And specifically between these, I have not seen those before.
Okay. And so just so we're clear, I wrote these down and made these yellow marks on this was the CSI Oliva prepared the diagram, but I wrote these in just so when we're talking about it, you and me, and so the jury can see when we're talking about it, what items we're talking about, that this is consistent with what your report shows as to where these items were collected from. Yes?
Well, all I can say is that the item designation was correct. For example, when you state E5 driveway, of course, the assumption is that it is on a driveway, but I wasn't involved in the collection and no, I haven't seen those before.
Okay. And so, but just for the ease of talking about these items, if these were the designations where CSI Oliva had said that these items designated in your report where they had been found, you wouldn't have any reason to argue with that or to dispute that, right?
No, but I wouldn't have an opinion. I've never seen it.
Not asking you to even have an opinion.
Yes, ma'am.
You have plenty of opinions that we're interested in.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, defense and still your witness.
Thank you, Judge. And so at this time, I would ask that the previously discussed defense exhibit number 7, number 8, and the number 6 that we've discussed be admitted.
Any objection?
No objection to 7 and 8, and for clarity, defense 6 is being offered as a demonstrative.
Correct.
No objection.
All right, thank you. Then 7 and 8 are admitted.
Okay. And now I'm going to try to figure out how to work this. Okay. I don't know why this makes me so nervous. Okay, so I'm gonna just very quickly, just to kind of recap what we were talking about before. When and I've added here. This was the list of items. Now, did you receive a copy of this when things came to you, or did you not receive any?
No, ma'am, I did not receive that.
But these still will, these correspond to the items that you tested that we were discussing earlier, right?
Yes, ma'am, those highlighted areas correspond to those numbers that we just discussed.
And to be clear, these are just my notes that I added to the diagram to help me. I am a visual learner and a visual person, so it's just to help me understand where things were. And then we have, that was defense number 7 for the record. And now I'm showing you defense number 8. And then we had that item number E6, which was the swab from the sidewalk that was collected, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I want to just talk to you very quickly, and I'm going to just start here. So when you make a report, you generally have kind of 3 main results that you come up with, right? So you've got not excluded, excluded, and inconclusive, correct?
That is correct. And typically that would be a comparison to an item of evidence. An individual is included, an individual is excluded, or a comparison to that item was inconclusive.
Okay. And so in this case, and Anna's already gone over a little bit, but basically what it boils down to is you're looking at these things and you're trying to say, is Isaac a contributor? Or is he excluded as a contributor, or is he not excluded? You're picking one of these three things with regard to the comparison to each of these items, with first with Isaac and then with Angel, right?
That's correct. We like to say that, ultimately we're helping determine who may have been the biological contributor of the human DNA identified on that item.
Okay. And so when you did your testing, actually there was E1, but your testing was even more specific, because if you refer to your report from, I believe it was June 27, your results, you narrowed it down to E1, the handle of the knife, and E1, the blade of the knife. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was a sample that was taken from E1, but that knife itself was submitted. And yes, I did swab the handle area. And then I also swabbed, which would be considered the blade area.
Okay. And let's talk about when you go through and you say that someone is not excluded, what does that mean as far as with each of the items? Does that mean that they are not excluded as being a contributor to the DNA that was found on that item?
That's correct. It means that I was unable to exclude an individual from that item based on a comparison of the human DNA on that item to the known reference standard that was provided to the laboratory.
Okay. And in the report that you created, there were some pretty, like, what I would consider like just astronomical numbers with regard to when you cannot exclude someone. And can you explain to the jury, let's see. And Judge, I'm just gonna, it's not gonna be an exhibit or anything, but I would just like to just write just a number, if I could. Okay, I've written a number here. And Judge, can I just show the jury what I've written down? And so this is 59, 277, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of triple zeros after. I took that from your report when somebody was not excluded as a contributor. So tell us what that means.
Yes, that is true. It is an extremely discriminating or a very large number. That number is what we call our random match probability. It's the probability of selecting an unknown, unrelated individual in the population that has that genetic profile. So for example, if an individual is not excluded as a donor, question would be, does everybody have that genetic profile? Does half the people in the population have that profile? No, given the fact that we are looking at so many different genetic markers today, each one of those genetic markers has its own individual statistic. And as they are multiplied against one another, because each one is independent, it becomes, if we have a full resolved profile, an extremely discriminating number. So that number specifically is, we would say this, that the probability of selecting an unknown, unrelated individual at random in the population that has that profile is approximately 1 in every 59 septillion individuals.
I don't even know what a septillion is, but it's just sounds like it's a number beyond even comprehension. Like, is there a way that you can even explain how big that number is?
I mean, if you were to use, for example, the population of the Earth and say there are 7, 8, maybe almost 9 billion individuals, if we were to divide this number by the population of the Earth, I mean, you would have to go through probably billions of individuals before you eventually find that profile again, statistically speaking. It was almost easier when we were looking at just 3 or 4 different genetic markers or our ABO blood typing when 25% of the population have A. But now we're looking at a marker that maybe 10% of the population has, and then another marker, and then another marker, and then another. And when you start multiplying 1/10 or 10% times 10% times 10%, they start to go 1/10, 1/100, 1/1000, 1/10,000. So we get this extremely discriminating number. But I agree, it's very large and almost seems confusing.
So just like a universe of Earths, like just as many Earths as we could ever contemplate, maybe even more than those we'd have to go through to find.
Yeah, we
Another
typically don't
person.
talk about it in the forms of Earths, but yes, we're talking billions upon billions of individuals before we would expect to find that genetic profile in the population again.
And with regard to this particular number, that was the number that you came up with regard to Isaac Aguilar as being not excluded from the items that you test or that you compared, correct?
Yes, for 7 of the items that were examined, we were able to fully resolve the profile where Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a donor. That was the random match probability that was calculated.
And then for Angel, and I'm going to write down another number. So another just really big number. And can you tell me what this number is?
Yes, ma'am. That is the random match probability on the items in which Angel Gonzalez was not excluded as a donor. And that number would be identified as 16 nonillion.
Again, just
Very
big
discriminating.
numbers. So when you say somebody is not excluded with the technology that we have now to do this amazing testing of things, you feel very comfortable saying that person cannot be excluded as a contributor, right?
That's correct. We go with each individual genetic marker. And if the person matches that genetic marker, then they may have been the contributor. Then we go to marker 2, marker 3, and we go through a gamut of 21 different genetic markers. And when that person cannot be excluded as a donor, then that's the final conclusion. This person is not excluded. And then as to the match estimate, that's the strength of that match, those very large or discriminating numbers.
And then with regard to somebody being excluded, that means that person is excluded as a contributor to the sample, right?
Yes, the DNA profile from that person could not have produced the genetic profile in which we are examining. So they are excluded as a donor.
Okay. And those results are just as important sometimes as saying somebody cannot be excluded, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Depending on the cases we're dealing with.
The circumstances. Yes,
Sure.
ma'am.
So, and then we have another one here that says inconclusive. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand inconclusive from your perspective to be that you just can't come up with an answer that is forensically that you would feel comfortable saying is forensically certain, I guess. Or maybe just explain it. You can probably do it better than me.
You mentioned earlier, there are 3 conclusions you can make when you're actually comparing a known reference standard to the unknown. The person is not excluded as a donor, and then we provide that match estimate. The person is excluded. Or that third one is it's inconclusive. So that means that I've taken this known standard and compared it against the forensic unknown specimen And for a variety of reasons, the complexity of the profile, the number of contributors, an insufficient amount of genetic material, highly degraded DNA. There are various reasons why that comparison just can't be made. And therefore, it's inconclusive to this, for example, the component of that DNA.
Okay. And in this case, you had the gamut of all three findings in your results, right?
That is correct.
And so I'm just going to ask you to verify with your report that I've got it right here in the chart that I prepared for myself to kind of wrap my mind around everything. So we're looking at item E1. You said that you looked at both the handle of the knife and the blade of the knife, correct?
That is correct.
And according to your results, from what I understood, you found that Isaac Aguilar could not be excluded as a genetic contributor to the handle of that knife, correct?
That is correct.
And Angel Gonzalez, you could not say that he was not excluded or excluded. It was inconclusive with regard to whether or not he could have been a genetic contributor to the handle of that knife, correct?
That is correct.
And then let's look at the blade. The blade of the knife, Isaac Aguilar was not excluded as a genetic contributor to the blade of the knife.
That is correct.
Additionally, Angel Gonzalez was not excluded as a contributor to the blade of the knife, right?
Yes, ma'am. That is also correct.
All right, moving on. We have E1. That was a swab of apparent blood from the knife. Now, you did not collect that swab, right?
That is correct. The swab was just labeled E1A swab of knife.
And from a forensic standpoint, you don't have a way to know where on the knife that swab came from or not, do you?
No, ma'am, I do not.
And I'm going to maybe guess, but you can tell me, is that why you did a separate swab from the handle and the blade of the knife when you took swabs?
No, typically when we receive knives or weapons, we will always swab, for example, where we identify potential blood, as an example, on a handle, as well as the knife, as well as the blade. So I didn't perform those analysis on the knife, blade, and handle because of E1A, meaning I didn't know from where it was collected. I would have done it anyway.
Okay.
But yes, by me performing that analysis, at least I could state from where it was collected.
Okay. And would you agree with me though that if I wanted to take if I wanted to take a sample from a knife or from a gun or anything, that the better practice rather than swabbing the whole thing and having one swab might be to take a swab from the handle, a swab from the barrel of the gun, a swab from the trigger, instead of just rubbing my swab all over again, for example.
I wouldn't call it a better practice, but I can at least state from where I collected it if I have done so myself.
Would you say that that would be important if knowing who touched what where was an issue?
I'm not sure if that would say that. And for example, in this case, there was the reddish brownish soiling over the kind of the entire knife. So as to who touched where or where the potential blood or alleged blood may have moved around on the knife, I don't know. Again, all I can say is that breaking on the 4-inch of the handle area and then the few inches of the blade, I was able to take a swab on each side.
Okay.
So again, as to who touched or not touched, I wouldn't feel comfortable other than stating who's the donor of the DNA from which I identified.
And to be clear, I'm not asking you to guess at who, in this case or any other case, like who touched what, but I'm just saying as far as who contributed to what part of an item, this is where essentially the rubber hits the road. We know who's a genetic contributor and who's excluded and who's not excluded, right? On any item, not just this.
That is correct.
Okay. And if we're looking at the black t-shirt, that was one that you took 2 cuttings from. And again, you said you took them from different spots on the shirt. And I put 2 check marks here and 2 X's. So to be clear, your finding was that Isaac was not excluded as a contributor of genetic material in both samples, but Angel was excluded, correct?
Yes, that single source profile identified on the front and the back of the shirt was consistent with originating from Isaac Aguilar.
And then as far as the E3, that was another swab that was collected, I believe you said from the backyard was the designation. And that was, Isaac was not excluded as a contributor, but Angel was excluded as a contributor, right?
That is correct.
And then we have E4, which was the fan swab. And that one as well. Isaac was a contributor, Angel, not a contributor, right?
Yes, there's one caveat to that is there was a major component of DNA that was identified. And from that, that is correct. Isaac Aguilar is not excluded as that resolved major component in which Angel Gonzalez was excluded. And this was one of those samples where there was additional genetic material, but not near enough to lend itself to a forensic DNA comparison. So the report would say additional genetic material, which could not be attributed to, and in this case, that would be Isaac Aguilar was identified on that item. However, forensic DNA comparison could not be done.
So potentially, does that mean that there could have been DNA from somebody who is neither Isaac nor Angel on that?
Potentially, that is possible.
Okay. And that's not uncommon where there's multiple people around, right?
No, that's not uncommon at all.
Okay. And then we've got E5. That was the swab from the driveway. And on this one, we have the flip side. We've got Isaac was excluded as a contributor, and Angel could not be excluded as a contributor, correct?
Correct. Could you do me a favor and just go down a teeny bit? So since I didn't create this, I want to double check.
Sure.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
On those 2 items in which you mentioned, E5 driveway, E6 sidewalk, it was a single source contributor consistent with originating from Angel Gonzalez. So therefore, Isaac Aguilar was excluded as a donor.
Okay. So just to recap and make sure that we understand your results. With regard to the knife, we've got Isaac is not excluded on the handle. Angel is inconclusive.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And on the blade, both of their genetic material cannot be excluded as contributing to the sample from the blade.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right. I'm going to pass the witness and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
State,
Briefly, Judge.
yes.
Mr. Foster, what is touch DNA?
The term touch DNA has originated due to the sensitivity of our technique. So for example, if I was to have my hand and place it on something, the potential is that cellular material, not necessarily biological fluids like blood, semen, saliva, but a very low quantity of DNA theoretically could be transferred. So that would be called touch just because it's from the hand coming over. The DNA itself is identical to the blood, the semen, the saliva, but it's that very low level quantity DNA that is in termed touch.
So there's potential to leave touch DNA, but it's not certain that every time you touch something, DNA will be left behind, correct?
That is correct.
So for example, if I were to touch this table here, would you be able to find touch DNA from that?
Again, there is no touch DNA, it would just be DNA. And the only thing I could do is, for example, if an individual was to swap that And then I was to examine it in the laboratory to determine, is there a profile? If there was not, then I would state that no human DNA was identified on that. If there was, then obviously I would attempt to make the comparison.
Sure, and forgive my layman's terminology of touch DNA, it's just how I'm thinking of it in my mind. So forgive me, thank you for correcting me. So was regarding the knife handle. You have no idea what kind of DNA was left behind on that knife handle, aside from the fact that you did test in the serology analysis and you found it there to be blood on the knife. Is that correct?
That is correct. So specifically, if you're asking the source of the DNA, could this be blood? Could this be something else? The answer is yes. It could have been the alleged or suspected blood stain, since it's only a presumptive test. But if it was mixed with, as an example, saliva or something else, my DNA analysis and testing would not show that.
Pass the witness.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject to recall,
All right.
but
All right, you may step down.
that's how it goes.
Just
Sure.
make sure that you're available if either party wishes to recall you.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start tomorrow. The equipment has been fixed, crossing our fingers. So we've been told. We're going to start tomorrow at 9:30. Remember my instructions. We're ready?
All rise for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. State, call your next witness.
State calls Dr. James Feig.
All right, if you could raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, if you could make sure you keep your voice up for the jurors and for the court reporter. If you'll state your name for the record, please.
Dr. James Feig.
All right, state.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Feig, can you please spell your last name for the court reporter?
It's spelled F-E-I-G, Foxtrot, Echo, India, Golf.
And how are you currently employed?
I am a deputy medical examiner with the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office.
Could you please tell the jury a bit about your education and background?
So a medical examiner is a forensic pathologist, and a forensic pathologist has graduated from college, which in my case is Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, with a Bachelor of Science degree, and then a medical school degree from Uniform Services University in Bethesda, Maryland, followed by an internship in internal medicine here in San Antonio at what was called at the time Wilford Hall Medical Center, followed by a residency in pathology, also at Wilford Hall Medical Center, followed by a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office.
What is forensic pathology?
Forensic pathology, or more generally pathology, is the study of disease and injuries as they affect a body or an organ system, or even down to the individual cellular level. Forensic pathology is simply the application of the principles of medicine and pathology to matters of public interest, such as a courtroom setting.
And how long have you been a medical examiner?
Sorry, 20 years.
In your capacity as medical examiner, do you perform autopsies?
Yes.
What are autopsies, or what's the purpose of them?
An autopsy is a means of investigating a death in order to determine what the cause of death is and the manner of death. And in the process of doing that, things such as injuries to the body and natural disease processes and any toxicological issues are noted.
During your career, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
I would say somewhere around 2,400.
Have you ever testified before as an expert witness in this area?
Yes.
We'll stipulate that he's an expert.
All right,
Thank you, Judge.
so stipulated.
Dr. Feig, on
October 4th, 2021, did you perform an autopsy on a man by the name of Isaac Joseph Aguilar?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 3. Do you recognize what this photograph is?
Yeah, I do.
And what is in this photograph?
The photograph being shown to me is what I consider to be an identification photograph. It shows the deceased's face along with our medical examiner case number, which in this case is 2021-2955.
And that is Isaac Aguilar, the victim in this case we were just speaking about, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, State would offer into evidence State's Exhibit number 3.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit number 3 is admitted without objection.
Can you describe the general condition of the body when you began your autopsy?
One of the first things we make note of is the presence of any postmortem changes. Postmortem changes commonly consist of things like lividity, which is a red coloration, and rigor mortis of the muscles. And after a time, that would break down to a stage of decomposition. Those elements, specifically the decomposition, is not present here. And so the body is in a state of what I would call being fresh, meaning not decomposed. And also the general state of the body shows that there has been medical intervention.
When there's medical intervention, do you, under the course of your duties, do you review medical records if there are any provided to you?
Yes.
And in this case, did you review medical records?
Yes.
On the decedent, Mr. Aguilar?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
It's been marked as State's Exhibit number 47. I want to take a look at that real fast. Are these the medical records that you reviewed?
I don't have specific memory of this, but it shows the deceased name and they're from University Hospital, which is where he was treated. So they look like they are appropriate.
And at this time, subject to the business record affidavit filed, we are offering into evidence State's Exhibit number 47.
May we approach?
Yes.
I am going to add an A on this. We're going to call this 47A. I'm going to give you a few moments to flip through this. Go ahead and flip through and see what you recognize and verify that these are in fact the records you reviewed before performing your autopsy. While you're looking through those, Dr. Feig, what's the purpose in this case of having to review medical records?
In general, medical records are reviewed in the course of doing a death investigation so that any changes introduced by the medical therapy can be noted. An extreme example might be a gunshot wound wherein a bullet was removed in the OR. Only a review of the medical records would identify that.
And in this case, what were you looking for?
In this case specifically, the thoracostomy, which is a procedure wherein the chest is open so that direct access to the heart can be obtained. That thoracostomy procedure had been done, and I wanted to see if there had been evidence of internal bleeding when they did that.
And reviewing these records, is that what you found when you were looking through these records? You looked to see what all had been done to attempt to save the decedent's life?
Yes.
And looking through this now, are these the records that you reviewed?
I mean, again, I don't specifically remember them, but the details here are consistent with the medical records I had reviewed. Yes.
And in your time, how often do you have to review medical records?
Daily.
At this time, State would offer 47A.
May I speak with this on board?
Yes.
So, Dr. Feig, you're saying that this looks consistent to you just because it has the same name as the person that you conducted the autopsy on?
In addition to the procedures performed, which correlate to my autopsy findings.
That as you sit here today, you don't have any independent recollection of looking through those records, specifically reviewing them, or which pages out of those records you reviewed, or anything like that?
Essentially, yes. I know that I had reviewed medical records because I referenced them in my report. This case occurred in October of 2021. So it almost seems unfair that you would ask me to specifically remember this record. That's not going to be true for.
Right, that will be. That will be sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, you're to disregard the last answer.
So what I'm asking you is that those records that you have in front of you, you don't have an independent recollection other than just because of the identifiers that are on the reports.
As I said, they're consistent.
Okay. I don't have any objection to the exhibit coming in, subject to our previous discussion.
All right, and then state, so the exhibit that you're offering is State's Exhibit 47A?
Yes, Judge.
All right, then that will be admitted without objection.
All righty. So Dr. Feig, what had been done after you had reviewed the medical records? What had been done in order to try to attempt to save Isaac Aguilar's life?
Actually, I've sort of referenced this, but he did receive life-saving, attempted life-saving procedure called a thoracotomy, which is opening up the chest and getting direct access to the organs of the chest, including the heart.
All right, and just one moment. Excuse me, Dr. Fife, if you're using medical terminology, if you could spell that, that would help the court reporter. And there's no need to do it as whiskey, foxtrot, or anything of that nature. Just spell.
Would you like me to spell thoracotomy?
Yes, please.
THORACOTOMY.
Thank you.
Dr. Feig, what was the result of your external examination of Mr. Aguilar?
So to break this down, the autopsy consists of two main parts: an external examination followed by an internal examination where we look inside the body. On the external examination, as we've already mentioned, we have the evidence of the thoracotomy. And in addition to that, we have injuries consisting of 2 stab wounds.
And where were those stab wounds located?
Both of the stab wounds involve the left side of the chest.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes. In defense, if you need to move around to see what the witness is viewing.
So I'm showing you what's been marked first, State's Exhibit number 46. What is in State's Exhibit number 46?
The paperwork I'm looking at now is what I call the body diagram that I created for this case, which shows a brief description of the injuries to the body.
And where they're located?
Yes.
And you said you created this, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And do you believe that this would be helpful for the jury in terms of seeing where these injuries were?
I do.
This time the state would offer State's Exhibit number 46 into evidence.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit number 46 is admitted without objection.
And then next, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 43, 44, and 45. Do you recognize these photos?
These 3 photos are photographs that I took during the examination.
Okay, and are they of the decedent, Mr. Isaac Aguilar?
Yes.
And are these the condition that he was presented to during your autopsy?
One of them is an as-is photo. The other 2 are after we have released the sutures that were holding the incision of the chest closed.
So are these a fair and accurate representation of Mr. Aguilar as you saw him during your autopsy?
Yes.
At this time, State would offer State's Exhibit 43, 44, and 45 into evidence.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes. State's Exhibits 43 and 44 are admitted without objection.
Permission to publish, Your Honor? Right. So Dr. Sprague, let's go ahead and start off looking at what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 46. Now, this is what you described as the chart you created, correct?
The body diagram.
Body diagram. So let's go ahead and first talk about this one, stab wound A. What can you tell me about stab wound A?
Would you like me to go through the findings of
Yeah.
the stab wound? Okay. So, so on the body diagram, we see the external evidence of stab wound A, which is sort of below the left nipple area. And when we do the internal examination, we find that that stab wound extends into the chest cavity in between ribs and enters the heart.
I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 43. So are you able to see stab wound A in this photograph?
Truthfully, not really. Am I able to point?
Yes, or you can even approach down here and you can point. Make sure you speak up and towards these microphones.
Okay, so this defect here, which is sort of in the hairline of the tattoo of the chest, that's actually showing the other stab wound, which I have labeled as stab wound B in the diagram. Above that, you can see the sutured thoracotomy, which again is the medical intervention. The sutures that are holding that incision closed also enclose the stab wound A. So therefore, I would say that you can't really see stab wound A until we release those sutures.
So I'm going to show you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 44. Now, as you can see up here, is this kind of a closer photo?
Yes, so this is considered a close-up photo. Down here, we can see stab wound B. And up here, this is after we've released the sutures, and we can see stab wound A.
Now, is this how it would have appeared before those sutures were done, or has anything happened with the skin?
Well, I mean, the only thing that would be different is that incision would not have been there.
Okay. So would the skin have been stretched any, or like would that hole have been about that same size, or what effect does the suturing have?
When you incise the skin like this in such a wide area, the skin tends to retract. So before the incision, we would expect the skin to cover this gap area. So therefore, things collapse down a little bit.
Okay. You can go ahead and take a seat back up there. So whatever, I'm going to go ahead and approach. I'm sure it's been marked but not admitted right now as State's Exhibit number 45. Now you said this was a closer up photo of that injury and the incision, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what is being done in here to manipulate the body at all?
So I guess you can't see this photograph, but what's happening here is that there is an assistant that is putting traction on the skin to sort of reproduce how it would have appeared if it were not for the incision above it.
So this is what the skin would normally have looked like, or like the amount of elasticity. I can't say that word.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, we would once again offer State's Exhibit number 45.
All right.
I'll make the same objections that I made previously. Your Honor.
All right. If I could see number 45 again, please.
Your Honor, and the state would argue that this helps the jury understand what was done.
All right, everyone, please be seated. State, I believe you were offering into evidence State's Exhibits 43, 44, and 45.
Your Honor.
Any objections, defense?
Other than, well, at this point now, I don't have any objections.
All right, State's Exhibits 43, 44, and 45 are admitted without objection.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Granted.
All right.
So we were just talking about state's exhibit number 45, which is,
And you may step down.
yeah, been redacted. So I'm showing you 44 and 45 together, as you can see. Can you please explain what's happening in state's exhibit number 45? Which is on top of 44 at the moment.
Okay, so 45 can be considered a close-up of 44, right?
That's what you were talking about, manipulating the skin, correct?
Yeah, did I say that in court? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So sorry. In this photograph, what is the only difference really is that there is an assistant that's making the skin taut to reapproximate how it would have appeared without that incision above it.
I think you go ahead and take a seat. Now that we've shown the jury stab wound A and stab wound B, what were the findings once you were examining Mr. Aguilar internally?
So I think I'd mentioned previously the stab wound A, the one that is closest to the incision produced by the thoracotomy, it goes in between the ribs and goes into the chest cavity, goes through what's called the pericardial sac, and enters the heart. The other stab wound B, does not enter a body cavity, does not enter the chest cavity, does not enter the abdominal cavity. What it does is that the blade is stopped by the ribs themselves.
And stab wound B, you're stopped by the ribs. How do you know it was stopped by the ribs?
When doing the internal examination or the autopsy, when we remove the skin and subcutaneous layer from stab wound B, we can see knife marks on the ribs.
So going back to stab wound A, you said that this pierced the heart, correct?
That is correct.
Did you measure the depth of the incision or the depth of the wound?
I did.
How long was that wound?
So the answer is approximately 9 centimeters. It's going to be around 3.5 inches. There is, however, a caveat that I have to give for this. Measuring depths of stab wounds is inexact. This is due to the fact that we don't know the exact positioning of the heart when the knife entered it, and we don't know how far into the heart the knife actually extended. So this is sort of a minimum distance that could have resulted in these injuries.
And then what about stab wound B?
Stab wound B did not enter very deeply, again, because it's stopped by the ribs. It's actually going to be somewhere around 1 1/3 inches.
And for stab wound A, you said it pierced the heart. Would that be considered a serious bodily injury?
That would be considered a serious bodily injury and a fatal injury.
Did you, at this time or during your autopsy, did you also perform any sort of toxicology testing?
Toxicology testing was performed.
Okay, but you or someone else?
The toxicology samples are obtained by myself in the morgue. They are tested in our forensic toxicology lab elsewhere in the building.
And what's the purpose for that?
Of what?
Of toxicology testing.
The toxicology testing has a few different purposes. For one, we often are confronted with overdose deaths. And in those situations, the toxicology actually shows what the cause of death is. For other situations, such as maybe a traffic accident, it is, and there's a driver involved, it may be of interest for someone to know what levels of alcohol they might be on or what other drugs are in their system. That would not actually impact my cause of death statement, but it is something that would enter again into the realm of public interest.
And in Mr. Aguilar's toxicology screen, did you find alcohol?
Alcohol or ethanol is present, yes.
What was the result of that?
So in testing the blood, his alcohol level is 0.113.
And then also during the course of your autopsy, did you collect any known samples from Mr. Aguilar?
I'm sorry,
Any known samples or blood samples?
I'm not sure I understand.
Do you ever take a blood card?
Yes, it's standard practice to obtain what we call a blood spot card, and that can be utilized for doing DNA examination.
And in this case, did you take a blood drop card from Mr. Aguilar?
Yes.
So based upon your autopsy and everything that you reviewed, do you have an opinion as to the cause of death of Mr. Aguilar?
The cause of death is stab wounds.
Ask the witness.
Defense.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So, doctor, I'm just gonna refer you to your general examination of Isaac. Would you agree with me that 70 inches tall, because we normally don't measure ourselves in inches, is that about 5'10"?
5'10", yes.
Okay. And with regard to the weight, I believe that you said, well, did you say how much he weighed?
Just over 250 pounds.
So 252 pounds is what your report meant, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So 5'10" and 252 pounds.
Yes.
And I want to ask you about the stab wounds. So with stab wound A, well, I'm going to reverse that. Stab wound B, would that have been, in your opinion, on its own, a fatal?
Okay, good point. The stab wound B is in a category that we would say probably not fatal with appropriate medical attention, meaning that the wound is irrigated and checked for any bleeding from small vessels and antibiotics are applied.
And stab wound A, you basically, it sounds like you said that there was, so the pericardial sac, can you just explain to the jury what that is in layman's terms?
I'll try.
Thanks.
So the heart in the chest is surrounded by a thin tissue capsule called the pericardial sac. And literally it is sort of like a balloon almost surrounding the heart.
And so we have this kind of sac, and then the heart is inside of that sac.
Yes.
And inside that sac, is there like blood inside there, or what's inside? Like, is there stuff inside the sac other than just the heart itself?
Ordinarily, that would be something we call a potential space. There really shouldn't be anything in there. If there's something like blood, that would be considered pathologic. If there's pus, that would be pathologic. And those would be the two main things that actually would be in that space.
So is it more just kind of like, would it be more accurate to think of it almost kind of like a saran wrap around the heart? Like you're not supposed to have lots of gaps or anything, but a healthy pericardial sac would be pretty wrapped around there.
I think that's a good analogy.
I'm always trying to think of things in the way that my brain is. And you said that pericardial sac had been punctured, correct?
Yes.
And then you said that there was a perforation in that left ventricle wall near the apex of the heart. So explain to me, what is the apex of the heart?
All right. So I'm going to try and give the jury an anatomy lesson. So the heart is perhaps a little bit reversed of what you might think when we refer to the base and the apex. The base is actually on top of the heart, and it is where the great vessels enter and leave the heart. So, for example, the aorta and the vena cava.
Excuse me, vena cava. If you'll spell that, please.
Venacava. Where that junction is considered the base of the heart. The opposite end, which is actually now down lower, is what we refer to as the apex, and that's sort of a free standing part of the heart, and actually sort of makes a little bit of a point, because if you think about it, the base is a little bit more broad and the apex is a little bit more pointed. Does that make sense?
No, that's very helpful. And then so explain like what the ventricles are. We have, you said you're talking about the left one here, but I'm assuming we have a left and a right. Is that correct?
There's 4 chambers in the heart. There's 2 atria and 2 ventricles. Both the atria and the ventricles are divided into left and right components. The left component is the part of the heart that pumps blood into the body, with the exception of the lungs. And so therefore that heart muscle is thicker than on the right side.
And so the blood would come into, like, if my hands are, I'm trying to make a big heart with my hands. On the left side is where the blood comes into the heart.
The blood will enter on the right side.
Oh, I'm sorry, on the right side, and then is the left side what pumps it out to the rest of the.
Right. I mean that. So right, the actual flow is going to be the blood comes into the right atrium, then it goes into the right ventricle, and then it gets pumped out into the lungs, where it is oxygenated, and then it will come back into the left side of the heart in the left atrium, and then outflow through the aorta, aorta, to the body.
So what happens in that left ventricle? I didn't hear it mentioned.
What do you mean?
Like what the left ventricle, where is that on the journey of the blood in the heart, in or out? The left ventricle.
Yeah, the left ventricle is going to be the final stop before it enters the body. The thing about the left ventricle is that is the true pumping portion. So that has the most muscle, and it contracts strongly enough to send the blood on its journey to the body.
So essentially, any sort of puncture to that left ventricle, that could be life-threatening without a doubt, right?
Yes, yes.
And was there only, you said, a single puncture?
There is a single puncture. I had actually noted, if I can refer to my report, the defect in the heart is 2.5 centimeters.
And that's what you said was about, you said about 3 inches or no?
I'm sorry.
Put centimeters to inches for all of us that don't use metric.
I mean, 1 centimeter is going to be just about 0.4 inches. It's just under half an inch.
So 2.5 centimeters. I'm going to cheat and use my calculator.
I don't do math under pressure either.
Me neither. So that makes me feel better. So would you disagree if the math comes out to about 0.98 inches, like just under an inch?
I have a sheet here, a ruler with both
Awesome.
units, and yes, I agree with you.
Okay. So you have a perforation in the left ventricle that is a little less than an inch in depth or in length. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
This is a diameter that is being given, so that it's going to be the widest part of the defect.
So it could potentially be like a knife point where it's just, you're measuring whatever the widest diameter of the puncture is, right?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay. And so if we're referring back to the state's exhibit, so if we're looking at the state's exhibit number 44, so you're not talking about, when you're talking about the measurements in the ventricle, you're not talking about this image here. You're talking about once you actually examine the heart itself. Once you've
That's correct.
Okay. And to be clear, as part of an autopsy, for most of us who don't do your kind of work, it sounds pretty gruesome, but you do actually have to open up the chest cavity sometimes to see what's going on in the body, right?
Correct.
And in this case, you found that there was a puncture to that left ventricle, a single puncture, that you have a diameter, but you said that it's very hard to calculate with any certainty what the actual depth was.
But there's sort of two different things. The measurement of the defect on the heart is just a measurement. The measurement of the depth of penetration from the top level of the skin to the deepest point of the wound track, that's what I was trying to say is a little inexact. Again, because we don't know the exact positioning of the heart at the time. Was it contracting or was it expanding? And we don't know, since these are sort of, hollow organs, they do move around a bit inside the body. What I typically do for a situation like this is I measure conservatively and give a minimum distance that would account for all the findings. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. And so when you're doing the autopsy, in this case, like it's not like some of the shows where you'll see where you could put these big, like big rods in and be like, oh, he got stabbed at this angle when he was laying on his back and he'd eaten, Cheerios for breakfast. And you just, there's a lot of stuff you just can't know from your examination, correct?
We certainly take a look at the wound track and give things like directionality, but I mean, I guess more towards your point, if you watch any sort of crime show, they have a tendency to attribute things that we do that simply are not possible.
Right. So in this case, was it possible for you to determine at what angle these wounds were made?
So again, I can tell you the directionality through the body. The problem with that is that we don't know what the actual positioning of the body was in at the time the injury was produced.
So for example, you couldn't tell as whether or not, say, this wound, and this was on the right side?
The left side.
The left side. So you wouldn't be able to tell us whether this was a wound that was caused by somebody being standing up and being stabbed this way, or whether they fell. You don't have a way to determine that from your examination of these wounds, do you?
Right. The answer is yes. I just want to rephrase that slightly.
Okay.
So in this example, and I think we're talking about the heart stab wound, the directionality as it goes through the body is coming front to back, and it's coming slightly left to right.
Do you mind stepping down? And I'm going to be the crash test dummy, I guess. But can you show the jury, and you can use my pen sort of to kind of show, like, if use the pen as a point, where would that have gone in and what direction?
Okay, so this not to scale at all.
For the record, I'm barely 5'2", and I'm not going to say how much I weigh.
Okay, so there's two components to this stab wound track. It's going front to back. and it's going a little left to right, which is like this. So if we try and do both of those things at once, it's going to be something like this.
Right.
But to your point, I don't know if that happened while he was standing or lying down or sitting.
And you don't know if it was with somebody else holding a knife or if he fell on a knife that he was holding. You don't have a way to determine that from your autopsy, do you?
I mean, that would be an unusual way to fall on your knife, but I can't discount it.
If somebody's wrestling around and there's a knife involved, you don't have a way from your autopsy to know what happened or what sequence of events caused that injury, do you?
Yes.
Yes, you do. Or no, you don't.
I'm trying to agree with you. Yes, I agree.
So could you or could you not determine how those injuries occurred?
Right. So the thing is that we have basically a snapshot and we don't know the circumstances that led up to that. What we have is just, like I said, a snapshot of how things end up.
Okay, great. So essentially, doctor, what you can tell this jury is just what you told the prosecutors, that we know that Isaac died from a stab wound and potentially the 2 stab wounds, right?
Yes.
That you don't have a way to know how those stab wounds occurred. Do you?
Yes. I mean, can you ask me the question again? I don't.
You know that there was a stab wound, but you have no idea of how it was inflicted other than the information that you just gave the jury as far as the directionality.
That is correct.
Okay. And at the time that you were doing the autopsy, you didn't have any information about any sort of height, weight, or information about another person who was involved in Isaac's death, did you?
We generally do not have that information available to us.
So you don't have any way to know how that, I guess, when you say like a manner and means of a death, that's what you usually come up with once you've done an autopsy, right?
Right. So just to rephrase that again, the examination of the body then leads us to a characterization of the cause of death and the manner of death.
Okay. And you would agree with me that anytime that a person is that a death occurs that was caused by some sort of intervening manner. I guess, well, let me ask you this. What can homicide mean?
So homicide, okay, let me back up a little bit. So I have discussed manner of death a few times here. The pathology manner of death only has a few choices, and they are natural, accident, suicide, and homicide. To focus in on homicide specifically, that is simply put meant to indicate that a death is at the hands of another. We do not consider that to be necessarily murder. And I'm going to give you an example. When there is a bad guy that is confronting police and they fire at him, this may be a bad example, but typically that is done in the course of someone's job, and it is a homicide, but not necessarily a murder, if that makes any sense.
Sure. So homicide just means that a person died by some mechanism other than what you mentioned, natural, suicide, accident. And, you know, when, let's say, let me ask you about this example. So, for example, you said there's accident. Well, let's just say that you come over to my house and I'm like, oh man, I got this cool new shotgun I want to show you. And I bring it out and boom. Oh my God, I just shot my friend, Dr. Feig, in the chest. That if you came to one of your colleagues as an autopsy, that would be ruled a homicide, would it not?
So that qualifies in our pathology definition as a homicide. Yes. The question about whether or not that would result in some sort of criminal prosecution is that's not a part of the pathologist's job.
And so another example would be, let's say if I invite you over to look at my new shotgun and you're like, Kathy, what in the world are you doing with that gun? Give it here. And I'm like, no, you can't have it. And we're arguing over the gun and it goes off. And oh my God, you shot me. If I go and get autopsy, that's probably going to come across in a report as a homicide, right?
Yes.
And your job essentially is that you are a medical doctor who determines what made someone die.
Yes. So again, our primary directive and the reason we're really here is to assign a cause of death and a manner of death.
And I have another weird question for you. I'm kind of so with regard to that the B, you said that it was stopped by the ribs, and you said it was in your report. Were there actually 2 ribs where you did find markings from the knife, or was it just one? How did it stop?
No. The knife did leave a mark on 2 rib surfaces. Yes.
Okay. And in your report, you referenced the left 8th and 9th ribs. How many ribs, like if I'm going to be the demonstrator, but how many ribs do human beings have?
So each side, the right and left side, will have 12.
And so where on me would the 8th and 9th rib be?
It's actually getting pretty low.
I know I'm not to scale, but
I'm going to
how
say
tall are you? Maybe you're a better crash test dummy. How tall are you? You're taller than me.
yeah, I'm still going to use you.
All right.
I mean, so one thing to keep in mind is the ribs are not directly horizontal; they sort of curve around. So when we're at,
There you go.
I mean, maybe I should be using myself, but it's gonna be like somewhere in this vicinity.
So up around here would be the 8th.
Yeah,
and 9th.
it's what I would consider the mid.
So the
chest.
numbers go from low number to high number.
The one is one is up here and 12 is down here. Yes.
Okay, so you said 8th or 9th rib.
8th and 9th.
8th and 9th. So why is it up here if the numbers get bigger down, going down?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 12.
Okay. So you said up here.
Yeah, I'm approximately.
Okay.
So keep in mind the ribs are only in the chest. You have a whole abdomen that has no ribs.
So if we're looking at on these photos here, let's look at this picture. Can you point out here with this picture where, like, approximately
So
where the rib
when-
8th and 9th would be?
When I look at this picture, so I mean, so we're up in this level. It's trying to remember how I said this was going. So we're really, when I look at this picture, it's a little bit higher than I said on you.
Mhm.
Where I pointed to you would probably be more of the level of stab wound B.
Oh, that's
Oh,
what
wait,
I'm talking about,
okay,
stab wound.
sorry.
That's why I'm confused.
I'm getting confused now too. Okay, stab wound B, yes.
So stab wound B would be, it would have been lower down around here, like 8th or 9th.
So you're actually pointing to an area where there are no ribs.
Uh-oh.
So I think that's the point of confusion.
Okay.
And when we get down to like the 11th and 12th ribs, they don't actually go all the way around. They're just like little nubs in the back.
Okay. So if we're looking at State's Exhibit number 43, and so just for reference, there's a tattoo on Isaac's abdomen of a woman, and would the actual ribs be like above where that injury is, or
I think that the ribs are going to be pretty much right underneath that.
okay. Okay. Well, that makes sense to me. I was just trying to figure out where those ribs were.
And so, but again, keep in mind the ribs are not completely horizontal; they curve. So they actually join up here. It's probably too much information, but they join up here in the sternum, and then they sort of for this area of ribs, they're actually going to dip down and then go back up and join the backbone.
And so for the record, it's sort of like at a curve from about, like you're motioning kind of mid chest, and it kind of curves around at an angle each way, kind of curving around.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. And I think this hopefully will be my last question about your examination of Isaac's body. When in your report, you go through, when you do an internal examination, you examine, there's kind of, would it be safe to say there's kind of a protocol that you go through when you do your examinations of anybody?
I agree with that.
Okay. And in this case, significantly, of course, other than the things we talked about, you noted there, when you say cardiovascular system, what does that include that you're looking at?
The cardiovascular system, the main component we look at is the heart, but it also includes the vessels.
So the vessels to the heart, like that you were saying, the aorta and the
Vena cava.
Oh my gosh, the vena cava.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And does that include the pericardial sac?
I mean, it probably can. I did not. You're looking at page 3? Are you
looking at your report, page 3, for your reference? Yes.
So this is very technical, but typically I would say that the heart, everyone's different, but I would give the heart weight and then say it's in an intact pericardial sac. In this case, since the pericardial sac is not intact, I don't include it here because I have a separate section for injuries.
And so in that cardiovascular system, when you talk about the uninjured epicardial surface is smooth and with epicardial petechiae, that just means the part of the heart that you're looking at that was not the injury, but the rest of the heart.
Right. So excluding injury, that is what the heart looks like. Yes.
Okay. And what does epicardial mean?
So epicardial, EPICARDIAL, is just a scientific word for the outside or external surface of the heart.
So like the surface of your heart. I guess your heart doesn't have skin, but it's that surface of the heart.
Yes.
Okay. So doctor, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you feel like it's important for this jury to know with regard to your examination of Isaac?
I mean, to summarize from a pathology standpoint, we have 2 stab wounds, one of which enters the heart and produces internal bleeding into the chest cavity. And we have another stab wound that is also in the chest, but does not penetrate into the chest cavity because it penetrates ribs, but does not go beyond that. The other component of doing an internal examination is to see if there's evidence of natural disease. And in this case, I would say there's no significant natural disease. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I just, one follow-up to that, as part of your review of in this case, would the timing of the medical intervention for Isaac, would it have made a difference had, say, let's just say that he had been injured right outside the emergency room door? Would any sort of timing on the medical intervention made a difference?
I would have to say that for this case, the injury is devastating. And so even if there's immediate medical assistance, I would opine that this is a fatal injury, regardless of the treatment.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll pass the witness.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excused from the state.
I'm gonna say subject to recall, but just to be on the safe side, I'd rather to that.
All right, if you will leave the items that have been admitted and just make sure you're available if either party wishes to recall you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Judge, may we approach with us?
Yes.
State call or recalls Officer Owen.
To approach.
Yes.
Officer Jason Allen.
Thank you, Judge. Yeah, good afternoon, Officer Owen. So may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just gonna hand you what had previously been marked as Exhibit 34 in case you need to refer back to your report. So as you previously testified on October 9th, 2021, you went to try to track down Angel Gonzalez to serve an arrest warrant for murder, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us a little more in detail? Where did you go to try to find him? Or what type of place?
We were at an apartment complex. I don't know the exact location offhand.
And was it just you or were other people with you?
There were other members of my unit that went with us, along with a detective that worked with us at the time.
What happened when you arrived at the apartment complex?
When we arrived at the apartment complex, the officers that were already located at the apartment complex made a visual confirmation on the suspected murder warrant, the wanted person. We got out of the unmarked vehicle and approached, announcing ourselves. Whenever we announced, the apartment complex had 2 floors. He was walking up the stairs. He ended up jumping from the upper balcony.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop you real fast. So as you were approaching the apartment complex, you're saying you saw the suspect, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point you guys announced yourself as police.
Yes, ma'am.
And were you dressed in clothing that I also identified you as a police officer?
Yes, ma'am.
You say that you announced him and that what did the defendant do after you announced yourselves as police?
He ran. He fled.
And what did he do to run and get away from y'all?
He jumped off the awning from the 2nd story, and then took off through the parking lot of the apartment complex.
What did you do?
I followed him on. I ran behind him after he jumped off, and then I was able to catch up to him in the parking lot behind, where I grabbed him and we went to the ground.
And what kind of ground did you go on to?
It was a gravel parking lot.
Did you sustain any injuries from falling onto the gravel parking lot?
Yes, I got scrapes and bruises on my arms before we landed.
No further questions. Pass the witness.
Any questions?
Brief, Your Honor.
Yes.
So you said that he jumped from the 2nd story of the apartment complex?
Yes, sir.
How did he land?
I don't know that. I believe he landed on his feet, but I'm not quite sure.
Would it surprise you that you said that he landed on hands on and knees?
It would not surprise me.
So could you show that to us? How would that be if somebody lands on their hands and knees?
Are you asking for him to
Do
demonstrate?
you have a copy of your report in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Can you refer to it?
I'm gonna object, he is having him refer to something that the question didn't call for him
All
to.
right, that'll be
refer.
overruled. You can review you may review your report,
Yes.
and then the defense is going to have some questions for you.
Okay.
All right, so have you had a chance to review it?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. You can ask your question.
So it was your testimony that you observed him jump, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you saw him land.
Yes.
Could you show me how he landed? If you may step down and
Like, where would you like me to? I don't.
right here in the middle of the well. The courtroom.
Whenever he landed, he initially landed on his feet. From the height, I'm guessing he crumpled down. He landed here and then kind of grabbed up and then continued.
Thank you. And then you chased behind him for short distance, long distance.
I would go short distance. It was through the parking lot, so
And when you caught up to him, how did you detain him? Did you immediately just grab his hands, put his hands behind his back? How did you do it?
no, I fully wrapped around. So I caught his arms down and I wrapped my arms around him and we both went to the ground.
So, like this?
Yes, sir.
And when he hit the ground, did his face hit the ground? Did you like push his face on the ground?
I can't recall at this time. I don't believe I pushed his face down.
So he didn't sustain any injuries to his face at that time.
I can't recall. After we got him in handcuffs, the rest of my unit took control of the suspect at the time.
If he would have sustained any injuries, you would have made a report on that, correct?
If my sergeant would have advised me to, like if my supervisor should have been on scene and if he told me to do like a use of force, then yes, I would have.
So in your training experience, is it protocol that if there's use of force used on the detention, that you would have to make a report on that?
It would have been protocol if it was determined that use of force was used on him.
And there's no such report in this case that you made.
I don't know. I just got this report and that's it.
I'll ask you, do you remember making a report like that?
I don't believe we deem this as a use of force.
No further questions, pass the witness.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused?
Yes, from the state.
He's excused, Judge.
All right, thank you. State, call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state rests.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to take our lunch break. Remember my instructions. You're not to start deliberating with yourself or with each other. Everything that you need to know about this case is to come from school board. All right. So I'm going to have you all come back at 1:35. All right. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.